Hello and welcome. My name is Piers, Ridyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. This is the round table discussions post Babylon, this time with Matthew Hine, Chief Product Officer of RDX Works. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
All right. So I think that we've got, Babylon's out the door. We've had it up and running now for 6 weeks, a little bit longer. And we've already crossed sort of $13 million of total value locked. We've seen 10,000 downloads of the wallet. And we've seen over 1,000 deployments of components on the Radix network now as well. So that's looking pretty good. But I wanted to start off with sort of talking a little bit more about the history of the wallet, because I think there was a lot of very sort of opinionated design decisions that have been made in the wallet, and I'd love to just start from the history of the wallet, when it first started, and like how you went around designing the first version of the wallet and where it went from there.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back quite a while. We essentially started really deeply thinking about the current Babylon wallet. I want to say immediately after the launch of Olympia, when we got the sort of the known temporary Olympia wallet out. But I think even some of the thinking started before then, even. But anyway, around that point, we're like, okay, we know we've gotten out an Olympia wallet, which is going to serve what Olympia does. It holds some tokens, it does basic things, fine. We pretty much immediately put that in the can and be like, all right, we're gonna push updates out to this, but we need to focus on what is the wallet going to look like when we have smart contract capability, because we knew that was the next thing that was going to be coming. At that point, it was like we were looking ahead to Alexandria and then to Babylon.
Right.
But nonetheless, at that point, we're like, the wallet is going to be a really important part of this. And I think one of the first principles of the whole thing is we didn't want to just accept the conventional wisdom about what a DeFi wallet was. It would be like, okay, we just need to do something MetaMask-like, get it out there, like have it do kind of the same things, because we already were very clearly feeling, we were already in the design of Scripto and thinking about how the way DeFi works today and the way you develop it is really pretty broken, and we need to rethink this. And so we were deep into the discovery about how Scripto was going to work to change all that kind of stuff worked. And it really felt like the wallet experience was tied into that. This wasn't something where we're like, all right, once we're done with this, MetaMask will just slap on top of that. It's like every time we talk to anybody, no one's happy with MetaMask. No one's like, oh yeah, this is the future. This is definitely how it's going to go forever. And there was very clear when you talk to people, but even inside the crypto ecosystem, but certainly if you talk to anybody outside the crypto ecosystem, it's like the problems that I think now are really front of mind for people today. Like every time you go to a crypto conference, people be like, oh yeah, broken user experience, seed phrases are a problem. And so now we've got account abstraction and people are trying to solve these problems. But this isn't suddenly like a new thing that we've discovered. People have known these problems have been around since the beginning of a crypto. It's kind of like wanted to believe it was going to go away. So anyway, the point is that we made what we decided was like, look, we need to take the step back and think about not just how do we do a DeFi wallet, but what should a wallet be? If we look towards if this stuff is really going to have the potential we think it's going to have, just in general, like not even just Radix, but like Web3 and DeFi. What is that user experience actually going to be? It's clearly not what we already have. This isn't a matter of just incrementally sort of updating things. It's sort of like there was this blue sky of figuring out what that feature was going to look like. And so we didn't want to miss that opportunity for two reasons. One, we felt like it's like this is our general philosophy of trying to solve things in the proper way. But then also, it felt like, there's a good chance that this is actually going to influence lower parts of the stack as well. Like if we're really going to solve this, it's probably not just going to be at the top layer in the wallet. It's probably going to involve how do transactions work and how do things interact with other things and components and all these things that we were thinking about for Scripto. So we bit that off pretty early and started really from first principles about just thinking about like, should the wallet be something that runs on multiple platforms? Should it be on one platform? Should it be mobile? Should it be desktop? Should it be a browser extension? What should be in the wallet? Like, should this be sort of like an omnibus thing where kind of your whole DeFi life is experienced in this thing? Or should it be something that's very slim that connects easily to other things? Like there are all these like really big questions about what is a wallet in Web3 that we really wanted to focus on first. And so a lot of the early work had a lot to do with that before even thinking about technical implementations or specifics of anything. It was just sort of like, what could a wallet be, and user testing that, and just going out with prototypes. Like if you, the classic product discovery methodology, which I'm a big fan on, is like I always endorse this to people in our developer ecosystem. But there's a great book called Inspired, which you put me on originally, which goes into this development methodology exactly, and you can do a huge amount of product discovery, basically figuring out what you're going to build, starting from these very thin user experience prototypes that you can iterate on. Like before you write a single line of code, before you make a big commitment of resources, just figure out who is your user and what are they going to experience your product, and just test that part of it. We even did this with Scripto. We tested like Scripto syntax before we wrote any of the compiler stuff or whatever. But on the wallet, we tested out. We were like, okay, let's just build sort of these very thin user experience prototypes of what a wallet could be, and iterate through this with both crypto users, non-crypto users, and just figure out what was going to make sense. And that was a whole lot of work. I mean, we spent months and months going through that user testing stuff. It was
and I feel like there's two. I think I would separate these into two buckets, actually. I mean, there's obviously a lot more, but like in an unnuanced way, I'd say bucket one is, how should the wallet behave from a UX point of view for the user? And bucket two is, where should all elements of those UX points live? So one is like, like when we talk about the problems of MetaMask, and we've talked about them sort of like quite extensively, and a lot of them are around what is the UX behavior. But then there's this whole secondary category of where should the UX live? And I think that MetaMask hits both of those points, but I think it's important to conceptually like pull them out and talk about them separately. So obviously the UX points are things like, your transactions are not human readable. You want to be able to see every step of the transaction you're about to confirm before you confirm it. Your private key is your account, or your private key is your account is derived from your private key. So if you lose your private key, you lose your account. You've also got elements of smart assets are not native to the ledger. So if someone sends you a new asset type that the wallet doesn't recognize, it won't show up in MetaMask. Even if it's a standard ERC20 created in exactly the standard way, it still doesn't matter. If MetaMask doesn't know what that smart contract address is, then you still have to tell it and say, hey, here's a custom token. I want you to add this custom token. So there's those elements of things which are around things that make it difficult for the user to understand what they're interacting with, and difficult for the user to be able to feel confident in the actions they're going to take. But then there's the other factor of it, which is like, what platform should be the first platform? And your question, should it be multi-platform or should it be single platform? And how should you think about how where the user has actual control over the wallet? And in many cases, versus where the main user experience interactions are occurring. So, you could be having something happening on a desktop, but you have other things happening on a mobile. I think it would be interesting to sort of talk about why MetaMask is potentially a bad long-term design pattern from the point of view of where the wallet should live. And I'd love you to sort of dive a bit more into sort of what your discoveries there were.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question and really both of those, I mean, you're right, they are just sort of distinct questions. One is sort of like, it's like your feature list and what the UI for those features is. And the other question is a little bit more of kind of like a platform choice. And I think the finding the solution to those two questions really comes from the same place of again, this is like classic product discovery thing. Like, from the user's point of view, there's a problem they're trying to solve. It's like, I have digital assets. I want to use those digital assets on Web3 applications of various kinds. What is the right model for doing that? but they think of this in terms like people are very action oriented, they're very task or objective oriented is what I was trying to think of. Like they think of, like they come at something going like, here's what I'm trying to do today. They don't think of it in terms of like, all right, here are all the tools that I have. Let me construct a way of doing something. And so good user experience is often about figuring out how can you make the user experience match the expectation of how the user solves the problem as closely as possible.
So what you mean by that is a user starts by going, I want to send Matt some money, or
right.
I want to, go and swap some tokens. They don't go, I'm going to go use my wallet today.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's like you sit down your wallet and go like, ooh, what does this tool do for me? Ooh, I'm going to do this thing. This seems interesting.
Right.
Like the only reason you're using something is because you want to accomplish some goal. And so like all of the choices you make and how you solve that problem for the user have to do with a lot of it is like reducing the conceptual overhead, like because nobody is ever going to understand everything that's behind, like how your full product works. They shouldn't have to. A good product and a good user experience is always about sort of creating this layer where they can build a mental model of using your product, which matches the way they think about the problem as closely as possible. And so they don't have to think about all the other stuff that's under the hood. So, if you go like way back to like, the original analog telephone, it was like you had this system where it's like, based on what you're doing, you're going to be making connections over wires to people around the world. But this got reduced down to an interface of like, all right, here's the thing you hold. And that puts sound in your ear and hold. And, this end of it goes on this side. This end of it comes to your mouth. And all you got to do is choose the numbers that correspond to the person. And you put your finger in the hole with the number and you run the dial around and the right thing will happen. No one understands what that dial actually did or where that signal was received on the internet, how that led to connecting a signal, how all these things got put together. It's just the only thing you had to understand as a user is dial the number of the person you care about. They're going to come out. They're going to answer the phone. You can talk to them. So like when you think about crypto, so much of the tools today come at the problem from the other direction. They're kind of go like, well, what's the most like technically simple way of checking the feature box? And then just assuming the user will figure out, they'll understand how to do that. So like from my point of view, no one was asking for a browser extension as their wallet. No one's like, yeah, I think that's the right way of doing it. Like the reason why MetaMask chose that was because technically it was like the most simple thing to go. It's like, well, we've got web pages. We want to be able to connect assets to web pages. A browser extension can automatically have access to the state of the web page, which makes that connection really easy. I guess we'll just make a browser extension wallet. This is easy. And then they tried to go to and explain to the user, hey, if you want to use MetaMask, your wallet is a browser extension, which is like that alone is a significant hurdle. Like we talked to a lot of people, that makes sense to nobody. Like it's easy to forget this,
right?
Nobody outside of crypto, right?
We've gotten
used to it.
But the browser extension being something that is not only incredibly powerful, but actually controls very large amounts of money. Is a very, very unusual user pattern. It's not something that everyday people particularly feel comfortable with.
Right. And because everyone already has kind of a general mentor pattern for the browser extension. It's like, oh, browser extension, like what are the examples? Well, it's like I've got a little ad blocker browser extension, or I've got a thing that makes it easy for me to add stuff to Amazon. Like the mental model that people have for a browser extension is, oh, this is a very simple little utility thing that I can install that mostly sits in the background and just like changes my browsing experience a little bit. It like gives me some little feature the browser didn't have built in. They don't understand that it's like, well, it's actually like a web context that has access to the state of this thing, and therefore it's like they don't see the elegant. Like MetaMask in some way is technically elegant, but no one sees that, and they don't care about that. So you don't, as much as possible, you don't want to fight those expectations. You don't want to go like, hey, that mental model you've got for how this works, throw that all away and let me explain this whole like. Just to accomplish this one task, like if you want to get involved in Web3, you're going to have to throw out all your expectations about all these things and start from scratch and learn all these things, which is, that is a recipe for exactly what we've got in crypto today, which is people that are super into it. They don't mind learning it. Sort of, it's almost like, oh, this is cool. I can learn these new things and it's technically interesting. But anybody outside the crypto bottle, well, this is like a huge barrier to entry.
So what is it that made us? What made you and your team land on the mobile phone?
Yeah, exactly. So we tested a lot of different variations of it, and we didn't just go straight to mobile. And it wasn't even driven by sort of like, oh, people are telling us they want a mobile wallet.
Right.
It was really more like, what is a wallet? Once again, it's that same question about what is a wallet. And what we found was that ultimately, the core notion of a wallet is this is a thing that holds your assets and allows you to sign your transactions. It's like this. It's this point of control. It's something where you go like, this is, and you can see this in the word wallet, of course. Like this is a concept we're used to. It's like a physical wallet is like, this is a thing that, I always make sure that I've got it with me. It's like, it's always subconsciously, I make sure that my wallet is in my pocket. I'm very careful with it. Like if someone steals my wallet, this is a huge problem because all of my sensitive stuff is in my wallet, my money and my IDs, all this kind of stuff. So it's like that. This is a concept that is already built into us, this idea of like, oh, there's a thing that I hold that holds the things that are important to me. And what we really need to do is bring that into a digital format. And the problem is a lot of people, I mean, again, I don't know, for those of you that are into crypto, like, I don't remember what it was like for you the first time that someone got you into crypto and to be like, oh yeah, download this wallet and do this thing. And, depending on when that happened, like, I would be surprised if anybody downloaded the first crypto wallet and be like, oh, I get this. It was always like, wait, how does this work?
I remember my first experience. My first experience of the Ethereum crypto wallet, you had to synchronize it first.
Right, exactly.
And
yeah.
so, and I can remember I did a transaction, and I then needed to check that it had succeeded on another device because for reasons, and I had to wait hours to actually be able to discover whether or not I'd actually send the money to the right place or I'd completely lost it.
Right. And for a lot of people, they don't even understand like the idea of like, well, the wallet is actually just something that like your money is held on the network, but the wallet is holding these private keys, which allow you to sign to control for things in the network. I mean, literally, I think most people coming in crypto be like, okay, there's this piece of software that like holds my tokens in some way. Right. They don't really know what that means. And usually at some point they realize, oh, I see what this thing is actually about. And they have to like reorient towards like, well, this is actually like a key signing device. And now I kind of get the whole concept of the thing. So this is a significant problem. And we found that there were a lot of natural expectations about I want my wallet to, like, if this is something I'm going to trust, I mean, for one thing, a browser extension may, again, make sense to no one. So like, wait, this thing that like holds what I answer is a browser extension. Like I'm used to this being a trivial thing I don't care about. And now you're telling me it's completely opposite. And then also the security implications and all that kind of stuff. And then also, increasingly similar things like this idea of like, oh, this is a thing that's important to me that I'm going to be accessing from a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. Like generally people do those things on their phone anymore. I've got a banking app on my phone, like sort of like my Twitter app, like all these sorts of things are like on my phone. And it's sort of like, I'm used to the idea of this being my sort of representative in all these different things that I care about. And the industry is even going, I mean, even outside crypto and Web3, the industry is generally going this direction. If you look at what Apple and Google are doing with passkeys, like they're embracing this whole approach. They're basically like, okay, your phone holds your passkey and you can use that phone to connect to websites on desktop or mobile or whatever. It's all this concept of like all of your important stuff is on your phone.
Right.
And we found that concept
confirming transactions as well, right? So like when I go and pay for something online, I may be on my desktop, I'll go and pay for it online, but I'll get then have a notification on my phone that then goes, is this actually the transaction you wanted to do? And you get to see the transaction on your phone in your banking app, and you go, yep, approve that, or reject it to avoid online fraud and security. But then that just gets the user into this idea that the phone is where I get final choice on things that happen for things that are important to me, and that also includes like two-factor authentication, includes things like confirming sign-ins. It increasingly is where the last mile of security for the personal user, from a user point of view, is, and where control is exercised on everything else.
Right. Yeah, and in some ways, it has nothing to do with limiting. I mean, it definitely has nothing to do with limiting where you're doing things. Like we still use desktop computers, we still do things on mobile, we do things in different places, we use different kinds of applications. But, as to take a Web 2 example, we're used to the idea that in many cases I might launch a game, or I might log into a web page or do something else where it's like, hey, we need to confirm who you are. We're going to send you a text message. Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, I go to my phone, and there's the assumption that like the phone is a unique device that's held by this user. So you get the text message, you can enter it back in there, and then you keep going. So this is the direction of play. When we say mobile first, I think it's worth separating a mobile first wallet experience from a mobile first application experience, because applications are going to happen everywhere. They're going to happen on your phone, on your desktop. They're going to be native applications, web applications. All this stuff is not going to go away. But the idea of that center of control of like the final approval, the login, the thing that's important to you, holding your stuff on your phone is just kind of the natural direction. And so if we gave that expectation to users in our user testing, we found that people got that very quickly, particularly people outside crypto. The bigger piece of the pie that we need to draw into crypto is like, oh yeah, of course, this makes sense. You have to fight it a little bit with people that have been in crypto, because they're like, okay, I have this notion about what a wallet is, and oh wait, you're not doing that. Like, where's your browser extension? We're like, well, actually, like, you reformulate your thinking a little bit. Like, there's a better pattern here. And so we have to explain some of these things to people in the crypto ecosystem, but it's, it's kind of undoing the damage that's been done by current crypto wallets that have been fighting a natural user expectation. And so when we found that we tested these things, I mean, it fixed a lot of problems, like being able to really focus on the mobile being your primary wallet experience. It just resolves so many complexities that you run into. Like, for example, if you were going to have both a mobile and a desktop wallet, it's like, well, people are automatically going to, I mean, for one thing, native desktop apps are like increasingly not a thing. Like, people
Right.
are sort of like, I got to download a desktop app. Who does that?
Right.
And even then, usually when you download a desktop app, it's just kind of like a front end to a web page for the most part anymore, right? So it's sort of like, well, okay, obviously, if you're doing these multiple apps, that means that they're going to synchronize, they're going to see exactly the same state between them, and it's just going to be. But it's like, well, actually, with crypto wallets, that's not how it works. Like, I think a lot of people, we discovered that people would often install MetaMask in their desktop browser. Then they would get the MetaMask app on their phone, and they would just assume that, like, okay, it's going to be the same view of the same things. All my names, my icons are to carry across. And then they're surprised. It's like, well, no, actually, you're just going to like enter your seed phrase, and it knows about the same accounts, but it doesn't actually share any of the other stuff. And again, it completely blows apart people's expectations for these things.
Right.
So the mobile first experience, the reason for that is it's really just embracing the direction that these things are generally going and distilling that user experience down to like, it just makes sense for you to do these things on your phone as long as we can make it secure. And that's why it was really tightly intertwined with what we were doing with multi-factor and so forth, because that's the way you solve that problem. That's the reason why no other network can really fully invest in this mobile first solution, because it's always like, well, yeah, it's a mobile first solution, but ultimately there's still one seed phrase behind your accounts. And what happens if you lose your phone? That seed phrase was on it. Now you got to back it up somewhere else, but that's not decentralized anymore. It just gets into this knotty problem they can't solve. So it was like, we wouldn't have made that investment, that commitment to a mobile first experience, if we didn't know we also could solve the multi-factor problem and solve that part of the experience, which then went down to the platform level, making sure that we knew that we could do multi-factor on Ledger and that would be decentralized. So again, it was this very, very integrated approach, and this is why we started working on the wallet so long ago.
Right. And as you say, a lot of this went in to inform the design paradigms for the Radix engine, for Scripto, and how we see like crypto mass adoption being possible by making the devices that we carry around in our pocket also flexible enough that if you lose that device, which people can do,
everyone expects,
or it's stolen, you still have this system in place that allows you to do recovery. It allows you to have enhanced security. It allows you to do things so that when you're outside of your house, you can't actually spend because you don't have the special key with you that you need in addition with with multi-factor authentication, your second factor, to be able to spend anything over a certain amount or on certain sort of accounts. And so it's just about making sure that you have these tools that you can build out that gets you to that end state. So how did you guys choose what features to go in first, and like how did you guys end up at, or how did we end up at the first version of the Radix wallet as it was when it went out of Babylon, and the sort of the choices that were made on what is there and what wasn't there.
Yeah, and this is always the exciting but also the painful part of this, where if you've done really good user discovery, what you've done is you've, at the end of a good of a well done product discovery phase, what you know is you say, if we can, there's a user experience that we have tested with users that we know is going to make sense to them. It's going to solve the problems that they want solved. This is going to work. This is going to be successful. And we know that we know how to build those things. We go like, yep, there's nothing in here which is new science. There's nothing that's like huge technical risk items. It's like, we know how to build that thing. Now you should feel really excited. Be like, oh my God, like we can do this. And in some ways, this is what RadFi was a lot about. We kind of been like, we can do it. Like, here's the thing. Like we kind of like, we showed off, like, here's what the user experience can be. We know how to build these things. This is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And we wanted to show that off to everyone. But then ultimately you got to come back to be like, okay, but you cannot, the thing that's always tempting is kind of like, all right, well, let's just work on that thing until we can make it perfect and get the whole experience. And let's just work on that and then release it all at once.
Right.
And if you do this, you're just asking for failure. Like, this is the classic mistake that gets made, because if you don't put anything out there early enough, for one thing, you're just going to take too long. Like, you're gonna spend years building something, and you're also going to miss out on user feedback that you could have been getting on an MVP form of it. So it's all about the MVP philosophy now. It's all about like, okay, we know this is the end goal. We know this is where we're heading, but how do we break that out into bite-sized chunks where we can start building pieces of this and have it be good enough at every step of the process? And this is always painful. It sucks because you have to make compromises on this stuff. And the compromises have to get down to, on one side, what are the most important things to have in that MVP for the first people that are going to be consuming the product, to make sure that like the most important problems are solved, even if a lot of other things are not solved as well as you'd like it to be. Be like, yeah, we know this sucks. We know this is not understandable. We know this is hard, but we had to get this one thing out that we know is the most important thing, and then we can iterate from there. And then the other side of it is just down to feasibility. It's like there's always going to be a practical roadmap of technical capability. Even when you know that you can build all these things, you end up kind of figuring, it's like, well, okay, this package of things, we can implement this together. They kind of depend on each other. This is something we can release and it makes sense together and everything. All the dependencies are there. Okay, now we need to go to the next set of dependencies. And so a lot of times it's like, there may be a feature. It's like, man, we really would like to get that feature in there earlier, but it requires a dependency, which getting that dependency done opens up this whole other chunk of functionality that has to be built, or else you're going to be wasting a lot of effort.
Right.
And so we get things like that with like, the classic example that I have to put out there is the account history, where people are going like, hey, why don't you have account history in the wallet? It's like, yeah, we know that sucks. Like, that was a hard decision to make. It was like, yep, in-app account history is not going to make the first version of it, because in order to do that, we want to have account history that's really based on the transaction manifest and the transaction types we have, and like really taking advantage of that and showing like what types of stuff you can't do on any of the other crypto network. Every other crypto network is basically like, token transfer from A to B, token transfer from A to B, smart contract call. That's all there is. For us, we have a lot more information, and we want to be able to highlight that in a really nice view, but that required dependencies on the gateway, which the gateway then had to sort of index information in a different way. And it opened up this whole thing where like, yep, this is not going to make mainnet V1. And in the end, not having history sucks, but it doesn't stop you. So it's like we had to make that hard decision. So there's things like that happen.
Right.
And you got to make those decisions.
You're in with this particular, and I talked about this at length with Russ, with this particular set of platform dependencies. You're in dependency hell, where you where you want to launch the network as soon as you can. And in launching the network as soon as you can, everything that is dependent on the network being finished then is going to be in an earlier state than if you launch the network later, because you could wait to launch the network. Because then you've got, you can then work on the gateway and getting the indexing right. And then you can, as a result of that, work on making sure that things like transaction history are so like fully formed within the wallet and have all of the information you want. But then you're sort of like 3, 6, 9 months or whatever post when your network was ready to have been able to build those things out.
Right.
So,
yeah. And another really, this problem is all the harder when the product you're building is more ambitious, and when you have done that really strong user discovery on that, because you're looking at going like, we know this is the direction we want to go, we've tested this, we know this is going to be successful, and we know it's long term, but it's this is where we need to go. And it is so easy with product development to fall into incrementalism. This is like, I mean, I like particularly big companies. It's like they basically can't avoid this, where it's like, I've been there. I've been at big companies where it's sort of like, okay, here's our product. Sales team comes in and goes like, hey, I can close this sale this quarter if you can just put this one feature in. And then management goes, put that feature in. The development engineers go, okay, we'll put that feature in. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And then you get 1 or 2 years down the road and you find out you have this crap product that is not understandable to anybody. Like if you've ever used sort of like professional software, like engineering software and stuff like this, it's like endemic. And it's basically like the classic thing is this user interface that has like 50,000 buttons and like 20,000 keyboard shortcuts where anything is possible because you've responded to all these incremental requests for features. But new users coming in are like, they will only use this if they have to because it's awful.
Right.
And so when we're trying to like specifically what we're trying to do with creating what the Web3 experience should be, and we've done this user research, we've had to make these hard decisions where it's like, yes, we could have made an incremental feature decision. We could have been like, okay, the wallet, like to check this box, we need to get this feature in here. So we implement like kind of the obvious way of doing that feature. But in a lot of cases, that incremental feature add fights the direction you're trying to go long-term. It's actually going in the wrong direction. It's like, okay, we actually had to like build code in the wallet, which makes assumptions about the way this thing works, which is not the direction we want to go. And this becomes technical debt, as they call it, that you then have to come back and it's more painful to rip that stuff out later. And it also breaks user expectations. If you start down a user expectation in one direction, people go, oh, that's how it works. And then you come back a year later and go, well, actually, no, it works this other way. That's worse than if you just kind of go like, just hang on, we're going to implement it the right way. Until then, it's going to suck a little bit, but at least we're not going the wrong direction. And so this is why we've had to make a lot of really painful decisions on the wallet to be like, we know the direction we're going, but it's like, when we implement something, we want it to be in the right direction, and we want to be heading towards that end goal that we know is what we need to be successful with the mainstream. We're not at mainstream level yet, by no means. Like we were never going to be at mainstream in V1, but we need to make sure that we're building in that direction as quickly as we can and effectively as we can.
I think crypto isn't a mainstream either. I think I actually put crypto into two very different. There's two key audiences in crypto that I think have very separate needs. Mm-hmm. One of which is the people who actually want to use the applications now are technically savvy, and very willing to fight applications and problem solve and get things done to be able to get to the opportunities in crypto. That's the mindset they're already in. It's like, it's not. I'm not here because it's easy. I'm here because there's a lot of opportunity, and part of the reason there's a lot of opportunity here is because it's hard, like because not everyone can access it. And so I, as a user, am prepared to fight with whatever the tool is, be it MetaMask or whatever, like be it the early stages of Ethereum, be it the early stages of Bitcoin, be it the early stages of Solana or any other network. I'm willing to like fight that because what's being built is interesting and exciting, and I want to go and use it. And then there's the other side of crypto, which is that for mainstream to be possible, you have to know exactly what all of the how you're going to solve all of the problems that are necessary to be able to get everyday people using it. And those people are not willing to fight. And it's really interesting to see the development cycle of software. If you look back at any software products, you normally have a product that works out how to like give people the outcomes they expect. And then later a product comes along and goes, well, that's not at all how we need to do it for user experience. So we're going to it does exactly the same thing as the product before, but it creates this sort of completely different experience that people go, oh no, that's actually what I want. I want that. I don't have to fight anymore. So we built the wallet to be good enough to address the needs of the immediate ecosystem and consumer, like crypto crypto savvy consumer to be able to use and test and get up to speed and start putting TVL and start using things on the platform, whilst making sure that we knew exactly what the path needed to be to get to the great user experience, which means that along that path, there is some pain in how you're using it. And we are very aware of that. And we are expending a lot of urgency and focus on making sure that we get to the next stage as quickly as possible.
And prioritizing, like, what are the next 3 things we can do that'll have the greatest impact for the people that are using the network right now.
Right. And we're already seeing that, right? Like there's been, I think, more than weekly updates pushed to the wallet. And we have the wallet milestones up and available for anyone to look at. And that's sort of like progressing well. And I think that all of that thinking that was done in terms of the architecture and all the user testing is really what's going to drive this wallet to the next level once all of those features are in place.
Absolutely, yeah.
Matt, it was really awesome having you on. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to the next roundtable.
Yeah, me too.